Show me the money.
Hey, it's me. Knock, knock. So, you got my money?
Think about it. You're dealing with numbers all day long. Decimal points, high frequencies, bang, bang, bang. Digits, all very acidic, above the shoulders mustard shit. Right? Kind of gonna wake some people out. Right? You gotta feed the geese to keep the blood flowing. I keep the rhythm below the belt.
I want to stay in Arizona. I want my new contract. Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money!
Where's my money? You gonna give me my money? Where's my money, man?
Myles Garrett, Joey Bosa, and TJ Watt are three of the richest players in the NFL. But how do their contracts stack up against each other? Welcome to Cap Strapped, the salary cap show here at Pan Am Football. I'm Max Dean, and you can find me at Pan Am Football on Twitter. Now, many of you may have just subscribed. We had a bunch of new subscribers since the Carolina Panthers episode, which I really appreciate. But if you're not familiar with what this is the salary cap show where I talk about the cap, contracts, strategies, and all of that stuff. Now, I normally do a lot more of this in the offseason, but because every single week we do a Patreon voted video, we're doing the edge market. So we're talking about the defensive end and outside linebacker, top of the league guys. The guys that just signed contracts in the past couple of years. So basically, I'm going to talk about how the Browns approached Garrett, how the Chargers approached Bosa, which player got the best contract, which team got the best contract, and all of that. So without further ado, let's dive in. So the first thing that I wanted to point out here are just a few of the generally reported statistics when these contracts are brought up on ESPN or NFL Network or on Twitter. And I just want to show you how these cursory statistics and details, they don't tell the full story. And if you don't know what to really look for, it's misleading. So real quick, I'm just going to run over it. Myles Garrett signed a 5-year contract with an average of $25 million per year. He had $43,546,125 fully guaranteed, but $100 million in total guarantees. Joey Bosa signed a 5-year contract as well for $27 million per year, $78 million in full guarantees, and $102 million in total guarantees. Then TJ Watt, who just signed this year, signed a 4-year contract for $28,002,750 per year, with $80 million fully guaranteed and $80 million in total guarantees. So a little bit more straightforward there. Now, I'm going to look into each and every one of these contracts in detail, and then at the end, I'm going to come back and basically give you this same chart, but with more important details that we've kind of picked up and discovered as we look at these contracts individually. So, Myles Garrett, he signed a 5-year contract for $125 million total in the 2020 offseason. The important thing to note about Myles Garrett right off the top is that he was only 3 years into his career, meaning that he still had 2 years remaining under contract with the team when this extension was signed. The 4th year of his rookie contract, and then the 5th year option, which had been activated previously that offseason. So that 5-year, $125 million contract becomes 7 total years under contract for $144,796,126. Now, if you take the effective annual average from that, it's $20,685,161. And I point that out just because, well, the contract is negotiated on new years and new money. The previous years and previous money, they still exist. So for the team, as they plan their salary cap, they're working with a player that they have under contract for 7 years, $20 million plus, essentially. So $20.7 million per year, approximately. So I just want to point out how different the effective value for the team is versus what's actually negotiated over and reported and so forth. Now, I think that getting a jump on this is a really big deal. I think it's something very, very smart that the Browns did, and I'll explain a little bit more why once we get through some of the other players here. But as we look at the entirety of Myles Garrett's contract, he still had $19.796 million remaining from the old contract. He also had just over $5 million remaining in proration as well, which means that money was already paid to him via signing bonus, but it still affects the 2020 year. That's why you can see that the signing bonus number here in 2020 is a little bit higher. So now that we've gotten that stuff out of the way, we're going to call 2020 year 00 because it's 2 years before the first new contract year. In that year, he earns $21,862,126 in cash. So that's via the base salary and the signing bonus, $21 million signing bonus to be exact. And then year 0, which is 2021, he earns $21,684,000 in cash. And that comes from an option bonus as well as the base salary right here. Now, all of that is fully guaranteed. That makes up the entirety of the fully guaranteed portion of his contract. An option bonus, keep in mind, functions exactly like a signing bonus. It prorates itself evenly over the contract for up to 5 years. That's why you see it in 2021, 2022, 23, 24, and 2025. The only difference being it's activated at some point later in the contract than upon initial signing. Now, between these 2 years, he's earned $23,750,000 in new money. So before his contract even starts the new year's, he's already earned $23,750,000 more than he would have if he didn't sign that extension. As we hit 2022, which is year 1 of the new contract years, he earns $19 million in cash, and that totals $42,750,000 for new money over the course of this contract now. In 2022, he also has a second option bonus. So an interesting feature of Myles Garrett's contract is he has a signing bonus, which prorates from 2020 to 2024, then an option bonus in 2021, which prorates through 2025, and then another option bonus in 2022, which prorates through 2026. So in 3 consecutive years, he has a signing bonus, then an option bonus, and then another option bonus. And so what this does is it keeps the contract cap hits significantly lower over those first 3 years than what he's actually earning. They will have to kind of make up for that a little bit later in the contract, but the reason they did that was during the 2020 offseason, the pandemic was at full force. And the knowledge of how that was going to affect the NFL salary cap going forward was pretty vague. And so they gave themselves a couple of years where there are built-in kind of, I guess, escape hatches for cap hits. And that wasn't something that they were going to have to come back and talk to him about. They did that all planned out in advance. When you go to year 2, which is 2023, he earns $17.25 million in cash, and that totals $60 million in new money. So you can see that he's getting a little bit more front-loaded, but up to this point, he's not actually earning $25 million per year yet. In year 3, he earns $20,203,875 in cash, which is entirely base salary. In year 4, he earns $19,796,125 in cash, and that's between the base salary and the roster bonus. And at this point, he's now earned $100 million in new money, meaning in year 5, it's the first time he actually earns $25 million per year, $20 million being in base salary, $5 million being in roster bonus. Now, I want to talk about effective guarantees, and effective guarantees are based on fully guaranteed money plus the guarantees that kick in at some point throughout the contract that are basically the minimum of what he's going to get paid. So we're going to look at each year, 2026 and backwards, and see if it's feasible for the team to release him. And that will tell us what his real, true, effective guarantees are for this contract. So if they release him prior to 2026, they do not have to pay his base salary and they do not have to pay the roster bonus, which means there is only $3,593,000 in dead money. And again, that's not something that they're paying him. It's something that they paid him back in 2022 that's just prorated against the future cap. If they release him prior to 2025, they don't have to pay his base salary or his roster bonus, but there is a little bit more in the way of dead money. And again, it's all prorated money, so money that's been paid in the past. But it's still very feasible to release him at this point. If they release him prior to 2024, again, they don't have to pay the base salary, so there's no new money owed. However, there is about $23.245 million in dead money. Now, that's not something you really want to have, but by 2024, the salary cap will be pretty high, and if it was an absolute necessity, you could do it. So that money is not effectively guaranteed, right? The base salary for 2024, it is reasonable for them to move on from him at that point if necessary. And finally, if they were to release him prior to 2023, this is the point where we would hit non-feasibility. So aside from the fact that he would have well over $30 million just in dead money, they also would have to pay him $10 million of his base salary, which a guarantee kicked in for in 2022. So at this point, we can say that the absolute bare minimum that they have to keep him through is 2023. And that means that his effective guarantees are $72,546,125. Now let's take a look at Joey Bosa, who was drafted 1 year earlier and signed, I think, a few days after Myles Garrett. So because of the fact that he was drafted a year earlier, it means there was only the fifth-year option remaining under his contract before the extension. That means that while his extension was 5 years, $135 million, it's effectively 6 years, $149,360,000. That means that the effective annual value is $24,893,333 per year. Now, we're going to look at Joey Bosa's in the same exact way that we looked at Myles Garrett. We're going to kind of look at the cash flows, and then we're going to look at what his effective guarantees are. So year zero, which is 2020, he has $43 million in cash. So that is a monstrous signing bonus. It's $35 million. And you can see there's a distinct difference between him and Myles Garrett already. Even though he had some money remaining under the previous contract, in total $14,360,000, that's still $28,640,000 in new money in year zero, again, which is 2020. Now, that money comes in the form of a $7 million roster bonus, the $35 million signing bonus, and the $1 million base salary. So in terms of being front-loaded, this is about as front-loaded as it gets. The cash flow slows down a little bit in year one, which is 2021. It drops down to $13.75 million, but that's still $42,390,000 in new money after just the first new contract year. That comes purely in the form of the base salary. Year 2, 2022, $21,250,000 in cash. Again, just base salary. 2023, year 3, $24 million in cash. Again, just base salary. Year 4, $22 million in cash. Now, that comes by way of base salary and a $7 million roster bonus. And year 5, he gets the most in cash aside from the initial year. and he makes $25,360,000. And of course, at this point is when he hits the $135 million in new money. That comes by way of base salary and roster bonus. So now let's look at what his effective guarantees are. If the Chargers release him prior to 2025, he has no more guarantees and he has no prorated money, so there is no cap hit at all whatsoever. If they release him prior to 2024, they don't have to pay him any additional money, but they would have $7 million in dead prorated money remaining. Very feasible if necessary. Now, if the Chargers wanted to release him prior to 2023, they are pretty much SOL. There's $14 million remaining in prorated money. Again, they don't have to pay him that. However, his 2023 base salary of $24 million becomes fully guaranteed on the third day of the league year in 2022. So that means if he's on the roster for 2022, he's getting paid for 2023. Now, that money is also guaranteed for injury as well. That means that there's really no way that they can cut him prior to 2024, and that puts his effective guarantees at $102 million, which is all of his guaranteed money is effectively guaranteed. Now let's take a look at TJ Watt, the new leader in annual average contract value, which is one of the main measurables that people go by here. Watt signed just earlier this year, right around the beginning of the season, a 4-year contract worth $112,011,000. So that averages just over $28 million per year. Now again, he had the 5th-year option remaining, it was the 1 year left, so that becomes an effective 5-year contract control for $122,100,000. And that means the effective annual value is $24.42 million per year. Now, TJ Watt has about as straightforward and traditional, if you want to call it that, of an NFL contract that we've seen out of any of these guys here. He has base salary and a signing bonus. So not a lot to really break down. 100% of his guarantees were fully guaranteed. So we can just look off the bat that $80 million is the effective guarantee of his contract. But just to kind of look at the cash flows comparatively, year 0, which is 2021, he has $36 million in cash. $25,911,000 of that, $911,000 of that is new money. So he also has a heavy upfront signing bonus of $35 million and a base salary of $1 million. Year 1, which is 2022, he earns $24 million in cash, purely base salary. In new contract year 2, which is 2023, he earns $20 million in cash. Again, 100% of that is in the form of base salary, and up until this point, every single dollar has been fully guaranteed. And going forward, he has no more guarantees in the contract. So year 3, which is 2024, he earns $21,050,000 in cash, and year 4, the final year, $21,050,000 in cash. So when we're looking at this, again, it's pretty clear just because of the simplicity of the contract, but just for the sake of being a completionist, I will just look at what it would look like if they wanted to release him. So if they released him prior to 2025, all they would have left is the $7 million in prorated signing bonus money as dead cap. If they released him prior to 2024, they would have just the $14 million remaining in dead cap, and they could even do a June 1 very easily because he has no guarantees in that 2024 base salary. So they could split it so that it was $7 million in 2024, $7 million in 2025 if they felt it was necessary. But again, by the time you get to 2024, $14 million is going to be a smaller percentage of the cap than it would seem to be right now. $20 million is fully guaranteed for his base salary in 2023. So if they wanted to release him, they would be paying him $20 million plus the $21 million in dead money, which they had already paid him. So again, 2023, not feasible. Now, that completes our look at each of these player contracts individually. Now let's bring it back to the beginning and look at the details that we've kind of hashed out here and see how they really stack up against each other. So now that we have all of the details that we've hashed out ourselves, we can take a look at these contracts side by side and determine which one was the most well negotiated from a team perspective and which one was most well negotiated from a player perspective. Now, right off the bat, I can tell you that the Joey Bosa contract was by far the most well negotiated from a player perspective. He ends up with $2 million more per year than Myles Garrett. He has more in the way of fully guarantees substantially, and his effective guarantees make up the entirety of his guarantees, so he actually has $102 million effectively guaranteed. The contract length of 5 years and an effective 6 years means that he can hit the renegotiation table in the 2025 offseason. Now, that basically means that that's when he has one contract year remaining and the team has to sit back down and renegotiate. And if they don't renegotiate, that's 1 year closer to free agency. The 2024 out year means that the team is basically locked into him until the 2024 season at minimum. Now, in terms of player-friendly contracts, TJ Watt comes in behind Joey Bosa, not by a whole heck of a lot though, where he gives up total guarantees, about $22 million total guarantees and effective guarantees. Compared to Bosa, he does have one less year under contract, which means even though he signed a year later, he gets to hit free agency or the renegotiating table at the exact same time. So for me, Bosa is the best player contract and TJ Watt is the second best. Now, obviously that means that the Myles Garrett contract would be the worst from a player perspective, but really I would look at that much more as the Cleveland Browns front office being very effectively proactive. Now, what I mean by that is they struck early compared to the other edge players who they knew were going to reset the market. It had already been a few years since Khalil Mack reset the market, and they knew that Joey Bosa was going to be up for a contract in 2020. And they knew that TJ Watt was going to be up for a contract in 2020 or 2021, depending on how the Pittsburgh Steelers wanted to play that one. So by getting in first, they secured the lowest annual average because we all know that they kind of all have to one-up each other. So whoever signs next gets a higher average. Whoever signs next gets a higher average. It's just the way that these things work. But on top of that, by signing him when he still had 2 years remaining, from a salary cap navigation perspective, they also got a lower amount per year that they have to deal with over the length of the contract. You throw in the fact that it was a 5-year contract on top of those 2 years, meaning 7 years of team control. That means that even though they were the first to sign him, they still don't have to come back to the negotiating table until a year after everybody else. The out year, which means the year that the team can escape the contract if necessary, is the same as the other edge players. And effective guarantees, they managed to keep under $73 million. So comparatively, that stacks up very well. Now, aside from the fact that they struck early in terms of earlier in his career, they also recognized that they had a major point of leverage. And while they may have obviously fully believed in him as a player and as a person, they signed him to this contract, and the last thing that we had seen from him before this signing was him swinging a helmet at Mason Rudolph in the 2019 season and being suspended for the entirety of the remaining season that year. So the fact that Cleveland got this contract done now is just a really good job by them, in my opinion. I'm not sure exactly why Garrett and his crew wanted to get this done now, because from a player perspective, if you believe in yourself and you aren't really afraid of getting hurt, the longer you wait, the more money you inevitably make. But I guess he got his guarantees, and that was important to him. But from a front office perspective, there is no doubt that the Browns got away with I don't want to say murder, but got away with a lot. When you compare these players, I think it's debatable that Myles Garrett is the best. And even if you don't feel that way, he's right up there. And he clearly has a much more team-friendly contract than any of these other players. So that's my take on the edge market as it stands. These three big-time players who have just signed extensions over the past year plus a little bit. So those are my thoughts on the biggest contracts in the edge marketplace as it stands. Thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. And remember, if you want to vote on this weekly Patreon video, check out the link below, and that'll take you straight there. Now, it doesn't have to be salary cap related. It can be draft related. It can be an extra film room for the week. It totally depends on how the vote goes. And I appreciate the Patreon subscribers already very, very much. Now, remember, you can find me on Twitter at PanAmFootball. And the plan is right now to do a film room on the Raiders offense later this week. And aside from that, check out the Pan Am Football Show with Seth Tootin and myself and the Patreon Q&A. And I will see you all very soon.